Good morning, friends, and welcome to our Sunday meeting. This lodge meets at 11 a.m. every Sunday for the discussion of a particular topic presented by a student of Theosophy, which is followed by questions and answers afterwards. On the first and third Sundays of the month, we're studying The Key to Theosophy by H.P. Blavatsky. The United Lodge of Theosophists all over the world are all guided by the declaration, which states, "The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all." The following is the form signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. "Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge, as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine." Today's reading comes from Sir Arnold's The Song Celestial. "The world is overcome, aye, even here, by such a fix their faith on unity. The sinless Brahma dwells in unity. The sinless Brahma dwells in unity, and they in Brahma. Be not over glad attaining joy, and be not over sad encountering grief, but stayed on Brahma, still constant, let each abide. The sage, whose soul holds off from outer contacts, in himself finds bliss. To Brahma, joined by piety, his spirit tastes eternal peace. The joys springing from sense life are but quickening wombs, which breed sure griefs. Those joys begin and end. The wise mind takes no pleasure, Kunti's son, in such as those. But if a man shall learn, even while he lives and bears his body's chain, to master lust and anger, he is blessed. He is the yukta, he hath happiness, contentment, light within. His life is merged in Brahma's life. He doth nirvana touch. Thus go the rishis unto rest, who dwell with sins effaced, with doubts at end, with hearts governed and calm. Glad in all good they live, nigh to the peace of God, and all those live who pass their days exempt from greed and wrath, subduing self and senses, knowing the soul. And now today's talk, reverence for life and nature.
Welcome, friends. The secret doctrine states that the universe is worked and guided from within outwards. As above, so it is below, and as in heaven, so on earth. And man, the microcosm, the miniature copy of the macrocosm, is the living witness to this universal law and to the mode of its action. We see that every external motion, act, or gesture, whether voluntary or mechanical, organic or mental, is produced and preceded by an internal feeling or emotion, will or volition, and thought or mind. As no outward motion or change in man's external body can take place unless provoked by an inward impulse, given through one of those functions named, so with the external or manifested universe. The whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by an almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings, each having a mission to perform. Whether we give to them one name or another, call them Dian Chohans or angels or messengers, in the sense only that they are agents of karmic and cosmic laws. They vary infinitely in their respective degrees of consciousness and intelligence, and to call them all pure spirits without any of the earthly alloy is only to indulge in poetical fancy. For each of these beings either was or prepares to become a man, if not in the present, then in the past or a coming cycle. They are perfected when not incipient men. This quote from The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, is to set the stage for this idea that we are interdependent with nature, and nature is not just something that's separate from us. It's not just, other beings like animals, different kingdoms. It's all a vast chain of being, and we're intimately interconnected. Everything that happens affects every other being. So certainly we affect nature. We affect the natural world, and certainly a lot's come out about how man has affected nature in terms of, big projects like dams that block rivers, or how we change the landscape and things like that. But what we want to touch on here is that even man's thought, how he conducts his life, how he thinks about the natural world, and all the beings that compose it affects it. And that by a reverence for those lives and for nature, we could bring about a great harmony towards evolution, towards our spiritual evolution. So the purpose of life, Theosophy says, is that there's a pilgrimage for each and every soul through the cycle of incarnation in accordance with cyclic and karmic law. And every soul passes through every elemental form, first by natural impulse, and then acquires individuality through self-induced and self-devised efforts, ascending through degrees of intelligence. And this is pure theosophy that we don't find in world religions generally. Perhaps esoterically, but what's so unique about theosophy is how it just spells out this interconnectedness with all of life, and through multiple lives, ascending through all the realms of being. Being men and women such as we are it stands to reason we have passed through many stages, the animal, the plant, the mineral, elemental kingdoms. Not that our consciousness as we think of it now was in a rock, because rocks aren't self-conscious, but that it has a consciousness that pertains to that kingdom and those forms, and that we have witnessed many types of consciousness and forms that make us who we are. Mohandas Gandhi had this concept of trusteeship, that because we're all brothers, because we're all interconnected, it's up to us humans as thinking individuals, as moral agents in the world, to not look at the vast resources around us as just to take and use however we want, according to our whim, according to our greed, according to profit for some and not others, but that as trustees we should be treating nature and all those beings and kingdoms as incipient men, as life forms that are precious, that are delicate, that have a purpose, that have a volition of its own, so to speak. And this idea is in some environmental circles, but it's not as well known as it probably should be, especially as we see our earth and nature, you know, the air being polluted and the water. We need to return to this idea that we are custodians. Nothing is really ours. We get to use it during the space of our lifetime, but then all that material that composes our bodies, the material in the world, becomes material available for other beings. So we're borrowing it. And that's one of the things that trusteeship is focused on, is that it's a temporary caretaking, so to speak. Just like we would care for animals, our pets, our children, help them grow, help them mature, help them flower and blossom to their highest potential. In the building of the home, BP Wadia talks about the great invisible, and that all these kingdoms of nature representing the great invisible, so to speak, and kingdoms above us, kingdoms below us. You know, we have science is discovering different particles and molecules, but it is all life, essentially. And much of it is invisible to us. But very fortunate is the individual who comes in contact with Theosophy and has the opportunity to create, by right endeavor, by application, a theosophical life. And by theosophical life, we mean how one conducts oneself in the home, how one conducts oneself everywhere. That by holding an idea of trusteeship, of care for the different kingdoms of nature and the different beings composed of it, that we can actually use our creativity to make a change, a qualitative change in the environment that surrounds us, whether in our home, our community, our nation, the world, and it can be within the sphere of one's living quarters, the material that one interacts with every day, all the way up to the quality of thought and reverence imparted to the air that is so abundant that we can breathe. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to worry about it. All the kingdoms that make up our body, they say the microbiota, science is learning, is more numerous than, you know, the cells we have and the DNA, just the microbiota in our digestive tract. It's composed of different beings and kingdoms, and they all have their purpose, but without an impetus for good, if they're taken for granted, if used selfishly, could react against us. We have to care for them, and they will care for us, so to speak. So those of us who come in contact with this idea have a karmic opportunity. And most of us are restricted to perhaps cooperating with nature, but one could also, as the head of a family, as having a position in a job or in the community, one has a greater scope for enacting this mode of living that involves reverence. It's an opportunity. So a worker has so much opportunity, a manager, a head of a company would have even more scope. So we should see it as an opportunity, and that we can make a difference, and we have a field of action in which we can carry out this sort of improvement of character and of enacting the philosophy in life. So Theosophy holds that the existence of the invisible, that there are spiritual rulers and psychic denizens, and Theosophy describes it as a plenum, a hierarchy of beings, processioning through involution and evolution, advancing from one stage to another. And the human kingdom is but one of those hierarchies. So how can we affect nature? I mean, by our living, by our thought. But to be more specific, we could say that sort of like a sincere honesty about where one is and what kind of world they want to be in could help one come up with creative ideas about applying our powers in the care of our environment. Cleanliness is one that is brought up in the building of the home. Just, I mean, it seems obvious because we're part of a culture that, does hand washing and so forth, but cleanliness of mind, cleanliness of intention, cleanliness when one is working with materials, with food, with taking care of the body, with taking care of the objects in the house. Beware, it is said, the fury of the cast-off paperclip. Anything that is just thrown away and disregarded is going to retain that impress. The elementals are going to retain that impress, and the quality of thought imparted to it, is it going to be beneficial to anyone it comes in contact with in the future? We have to think of it as a legacy we're leaving. As above, so below. Just as in the invisible there are beings of light and shades of darkness, there are brothers of radiance who cast no shadow, and brothers of shadow who are without shine. There are nirmanakayas of good and nirmanakayas of evil, just as there are self-conscious lords and non-self-conscious intelligences. So also in the visible there are the human kingdom, in which the state of consciousness is attained, and the other kingdoms, each with its consciousness and intelligence, but without the power to determine and choose between right and wrong. And that's where the human kingdom comes in, where we can influence them. Nature does not fully and wholly impel man as she does non-human kingdoms like animals, vegetables, and minerals. So being self-conscious, we have the power to choose and to determine, so that all the lower kingdoms are influenced by us for better or for worse. And considering the kingdoms above us, it's said the Mahatmas are continually giving off beneficent ideation. They are within the program of evolution modeling what we should do within our own sphere. Another way we could approach this is through devotion to becoming a center of light. And that we can, by our thought, magnetically attract to one's sphere, or one's home, or one's city, or country, positive influences that are in the infinitudes of space, and are put out by the Mahatmas that we can pick and choose from to purify our environment, to improve it. Has anyone ever walked into, well, this student went to like I think it was like a Buddhist place, but there was no talking allowed there. No one talked. It was just for meditation. And the atmosphere was palpably different than it was elsewhere. It was just, it felt clean and supercharged, and there was a sense of clarity, and it even seemed like one's thinking wasn't as muddled as it can be walking around. It just, one should try to experience it if possible, to just get a sense that there's a qualitative difference in the environment that's possible through our habits and so forth. So to serve the invisible hosts, those beings who are superior to us and those that are inferior, and it says in the laws of Manu that there are 5 sacrifices that we could each make, seeking and giving cooperation to the teachers and their teachings, or the gurus of mankind, and the Devas and Dian Chohans, the Nirmanakayas. Even if somebody thought about them once a day, you know, and then made it a habit, then one could think about them at another point and link those for a sense of continuity. The 2 classes of the Pitris, the lunar and solar Pitris, who give us our principles, our personality and individuality, our fellow men, constituting, you know, the human kingdom. And as this suggests, there are many kingdoms above us. And then 5th is the elemental kingdoms, that which make up all of matter and material. They've been called sylphs, undines, salamanders, but they're, you know, the mineral, plant, so forth, kingdoms. And they're intimately concerned in the progress and prosperity now evolving on Earth. So this gives us a sense of that, you know, ladder of being that we want to give reverence to, and realize that we have benefited from all of them, and that we in turn need to return that. That's sort of how karma works. So between the fear of but respect for the invisible, which can make a student either impotent or, you know, powerful in the sense of his influence and his magnetism, one should not, it says, push oneself forcefully without proper comprehension of its dangers, which could injure one, spiritually speaking. That one should take the middle way. Acquiring knowledge which kills fear and engenders courage, unfolding sympathy and appreciation for the whole of nature, the student thus prepares himself to proceed from the known to the unknown, from the visible to the invisible. He who conjectures that visible matters not, that outer things are unimportant, and so on, implies and that objects are lifeless, that pen and paper, pots and pans have no astral lives. He will then err. And those who disregard the body, the living temple of the living soul, again, injure the elementals and, create karma for ourselves in the future. It's through the small plain duties of life, properly performed, that the ego is often attracted to stream forth its radiance. It is the little things the work is done through. Therefore, enacting these things in one's life, in one's home, in one's sphere, provides an excellent playground for our spiritual and psychic muscles. And that we can bring about a golden age on earth. One of the things that is implicit in nature is sort of, a reverence for oneself, self-respect, and that this has to be a part of our outlook. We have to give reverence to these other kingdoms, but we can't ignore ourselves. We have to respect oneself and other selves, and have a spiritual foundation about what is self and what is not self, which philosophically can be tricky. Ultimately, we are the one self of all, but in our daily lives, we tend to make those distinctions between what is self and not self, and that's a great topic for meditation to explore. We have to, self-respect means that we can't tolerate our foibles. That we can't be down on ourselves. We have to sort of tolerate them, while at the same time eradicating them. Tolerance without the effort at eradication develops psychic blindness. And it will affect the elementals in our sphere, and could contribute to, a time of trouble or a failure. We have to remember that we are dealing with living organisms which possess their own intelligence, and which we have brought within the sphere of our thought feeling, and to which we have given a home, this in the near or the distant past. When we have, with justice and humility, seen the good and strong powers in our own individuality, we have also developed the mercy aspect of justice and the courage aspect of humility. And then we are truly of becoming, like the voice says, the ripe mango fruit, as soft and sweet as its bright golden pulp for others' woes, as hard as that fruit's stone for thine own throes and sorrows. So, people today have a tendency to put themselves down, but that doesn't fit into reverence for life. We have to tolerate our foibles, be aware of them, without becoming defensive, but also work to eradicate them. There are rules for morality that are strict, especially we hear of those disciples who pledge themselves to the gurus and the adepts, that they have to have psychic purity, mental purity, and also physical. So there's different levels of health and morality that we can attend to. It can keep our body health, which is important, and it can keep our mind and our psychic tendencies purified. So the rules of health spring from the doctrines of the great philosophy. We have to think of our body as the temple of the soul, and so on. Food is another aspect of reverence for nature. We have to take in food to support our bodies. It comes from the natural world. Having reverence for and appreciation for the food that we take in gives it a quality of purity and helpfulness that will strengthen the body. So the nourishment that we imbibe on every plane, whether physical, psychic, mental, or moral, is essential. A couple more points. We all know of Thoreau, who went into nature because he wanted to sort of confront the facts of nature and to live an authentic life, and to reflect on it. And for many of us, it would be difficult in this day and age. But we can use his example and the spirit of what he did in our regular life. He said he wanted to go to the woods because he wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if he could not learn what it had to teach, and to discover if he was really living or not. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live sturdily, like as to put rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner, to reduce it to its lowest terms, and to basically to understand it, to know it by experience, and to give a true account of it. There can be little doubt that he found a way of blending with nature. Where else could he have obtained his terrible and beautiful honesty? Here was a man in whom the very contact with natural life generated an enduring wisdom. He found that the acts of daily living might be acts of devotion. He said, every morning was a cheerful invitation to make my life of equal simplicity, and I may say innocence with nature herself. I got up early and bathed in the pond. That was a religious exercise and one of the best things I did. Morning brings back the heroic ages. I was as much affected by the faint hum of a mosquito making its invisible and unimaginable tour through my apartment at earliest dawn, when I was sitting with door and windows open, as I could by any trumpet that ever sang of fame. It was Homer's Requiem, itself an Iliad and Odyssey in the air, singing its own wrath and wanderings. There was something cosmical about it, he said, a standing advertisement, till forbidden of the everlasting vigor and fertility of the world. Anyone who longs to learn to blend oneself with nature should be grateful to Thoreau, for here's a man who gives us one kind of measure of the accomplishment itself. What sort of trade might we make with Thoreau? Our wisdom for his? How much he understood the secrets that we try to fathom. This matter of blending, alas, is a process. It lies in the actual harvest of understanding about what makes a man different, wiser, and better throughout all his days. Many men have gone into the woods and have returned to the world without having found their Walden, or even having suspected that a Walden might have been there. Does it take a Thoreau or a Whitman to be unworried enough to throw away, the time and let the hours be counted by those, just being in nature without watches and clocks and concerns? Perhaps. The man who loves nature and would work with her will have to bear each outrage she suffers. The agony of what we've done to the earth is the price the devotee must pay. And that sounds harsh, but because I guess we're all a part of this society, we're all somewhat responsible. The courage to live, the courage to die, to be true to the feelings of one's heart, and one's mind. This is not easy to come by. But we can take example like Thoreau did from the calm of a summer's day, the impersonal fury of a storm, the frightening countenance of violent death, and all the natural catastrophe. These must be the mysteries by means of which nature reacts in us in the distance of her secrets from our ordinary ways of life. Can we see order and wisdom in all of this diversity? Are we ready to walk alone in the forest on a dark night? Would we prefer to die in the poisons of civilization rather than in a tiger's jaw, or hopelessly lost in some barren land of wasting cold? Would we take nature as we find her, for better or for worse? The meaning somehow grows that to blend with nature is to be a person of unfearful and unexpecting mind. To accept that, the just and proper material of our lives. We could perhaps, if we knew how, each one of us write a Walden from our deep, experiences to each of our fellow men. But the mysteries are compounded with memory and imagination. And ultimately it says, to forget oneself is the very genius of nature in all of her affairs. She has neither pride nor humility, and her comparisons are made with complete honesty of purpose. The associations of nature are the most Catholic of all, for hers is the great chain of being which respects for its function every form of life. The notion of status is unknown to nature. She even has a grand neutrality toward virtue, save only the virtue of obedience to the law of all of natural things. It is doubtless the direct and open dealing, without deceit or pretense, that humans do, that enables nature to arouse awe and wonderment. Finally, a philosophic quest. So with that, we'll open it up for questions and comments. And I guess what we could say is that reverence for life and nature, and we should ask ourselves, how can we improve nature? I mean, not to change nature and make it better, but our world. How can we improve our nature and to have greater reverence for everything that allows us to live and have experience, and to draw out our potential, which is we're just beginning to get a glimmer of, is through the Mahatmas and Adepts and their teachings, is that very glorious possibilities.
I need to ask the question, is Thoreau, is he considered this directly or indirectly?
This student would say he was very self-reflecting. He's considered a transcendentalist. I guess that was a movement at that time. But confronting the essential facts of life and creating a mindful way of living that shows reverence for all. He was a very thoughtful person, and we should be grateful for him recording his experiences.
Another question. There is a real-life person called Chris McCandless, on whom a movie and a book was released about 10 years ago called Into the Wild. I don't know if you. It's about a young person who was born to a somewhat wealthy family, who kind of was really oriented towards materialistic achievement, and he felt intrinsic transcendental ideas. Also that there should be more to life than attaining degrees, than having fancy cars and this and that, and he pretty much kind of renounced on having a normal life in a very abrupt manner, and went on to in this modern day, like mid 90s, early 90s, start trying to live in nature, directly with nature, eating food from nature, and a lot of things happen. I don't want to spoil it now, but is that it sounds extremist. A lot of people have shared the book and the movie with several people, and a lot of them really like it. Some people don't like it. Some people think this guy is actually selfish. He feels he's so much better than normal day humanity. Since I've heard so many polarizing views on this matter, I'm curious to ask, does Theosophy or ULT kind of promote the idea that we should try to maybe be a bit more like that, or try to immerse ourselves more into direct contact with nature at the expense of perhaps even cutting off with normal day-to-day life? Just curious, just asking.
The student's understanding of Theosophy is that we should contact and think about the essential facts of our living and our mode and what it is productive of, how it affects our... Sometimes we don't even see how our lives affect us. We're all pretty stressed in the West. We all tend to have health problems, and we just accept it. So in that sense, that this fellow is making a deliberate attempt to try something new seems totally consonant with this student's understanding of Theosophy. And also, it lodged in my mind what you said, that, sometimes he thinks himself a little better, perhaps, than people just going about mindlessly. That's a typical stage of someone who's renounced. And it's definitely something to watch for, as one, no one is truly better than anybody else. But at the same time, his experiments are still valuable, and we shouldn't disregard them, just even if he does think he's better. It's probably a temporary psychic phenomenon with him. It happens to inadvertently to those who try to become disciples, even, because it's psychologically important to say, I'm making a change, and it seems like that's what he's doing. But we, as trustees, we have to care for the environment. If we think of societies that are, drawing a blank on the word, they just harvest what they need. They don't a lot of traditional cultures, before they have contact with the West, maybe, in the Amazon, they live very in harmony with nature. And so this fellow may be trying to recover knowledge of how to do that, and it seems worthwhile. Do you want to add to that?
I find a contradiction when we try to live more with harmony with nature in this society, then we start to live in disharmony with this society. Do you have anything to maybe say about that?
So how to, essentially, the question is how to be more harmonious with nature, but not out of sync with the rest of humanity?
Yes.
That's a great question. It seems that the beginnings would have to take place on the inner plane, in one's attitude and one's how one treats others. It's definitely possible, and maybe it's a pitfall that many have fallen into, because the two ways of life are somewhat opposed to each other. But there is a way to do it, and that's where we can invoke our creativity and using our what's the word? Sort of like by holding ideas, we're going to give off a certain thought. We're going to give off certain elementals, and that could be used creatively. Creatively, one could make experiments and living more with nature, but also not neglecting our human connections and our societal obligation. That's why there have been intentional communities throughout time, some more successful than others, but those have all been valuable to society that we can all learn from. And they're important, and those who feel drawn to do it should in the spirit of sharing what they've learned, like Thoreau did.
I don't think the two is separate from one another. It
It
would be
seems
just
like
like
it,
your
but-
higher mind and lower mind going on a trip on their own. They're together. One's personal life, one's social life, and one's synchronicity with nature is all in one bag. They're not separate. How you treat the nature also translates to how you treat people. They're not separate. It's the inner ideology, the connectivity that you started your talk with from the Secret Doctrine, that we are interconnected to everything in nature. That's the basis from which we should act.
Yeah, as an example of that, to take it a little further, it's been said that deserts are the result of
Us?
yes, the result of people and how they've lived and treated the environment in those areas. Not just physically in terms of maybe using up the topsoil, but in terms of like selfishness. Selfishness creates deserts, and that the earth and those kingdoms respond to how humans have lived there. There's one example in this article called Improving Nature, and it might be taking it kind of a bit extreme. But it says that there's a science of how to live and be prosperous, not by preying on nature, but by cooperating with her. And it is a science which has been well mastered by many primitive peoples. And modern agriculture is only beginning to discover some of those elements. But what can science do in the face of the linkages of human greed and irresponsibility which it faces? And that such a linkage they sort of outline, the author outlines as, this was written in the early 1900s, and there was the Dust Bowl in the 30s and stuff, that the Midwestern lands were sort of ravaged because there was a wartime demand for wheat. And the farmer wanted quick profits, so he cut corners. And the war itself was due to hatred of generations originating, in the past, hundreds of years in the past. And that because of how people acted, basically creating those hatreds, during the fall of Rome, affects the farmers in the Midwest, essentially. That one through ideology, through a mode of living, that these effects can be long-term and can affect the environment. And so we should be careful to not dismiss things without thinking about them pretty carefully, that the farmers in their indifference, not the farmers in their indifference, but the indifference shown by the people at the fall of Rome and the burning of the Alexandrian library, passively watching while knowledge gave way to bigotry and fanaticism, helped play a part in the effects in the future. It perpetuates that mindset. That mindset affects how we treat the earth. And so this author is saying, not, absolutely, but one can see that there is a link there, and to understand that the windings of karma are difficult to discern, but they're not altogether impossible to discern. That we have to kind of think outside the box. And you know, in terms of how can, the big question for this student after reading all this was like, great, I'm totally on board, I believe it, but how do we like return to a state of balance? And that it seems is multifaceted.
You know, you're talking about the previous cycle affecting the 1914, and this is 2014, it's affecting this cycle too. But there are issues today that we should be concerned about, because the oil fields are now impinging upon the lands of the American Indians. And they're up in arms about what these big companies are doing, because they come in and strip all of the land. And they're saying that all of the animals disappear eventually because the water is affected. And there's an outcry that general public be aware of what's going on and we get involved in it. And so I thought I'd put that in, that these issues that you talked about in the past are still with us, because these companies want to make big profits fast. They take all of the landscape and destroy everything on it. And India had a program where these big companies are now going to them as well, and the population who have been using the rivers and small ponds for their livelihood are saying that, no, we don't want you here, and they're actually standing and being shot and killed because they don't want to give into the government's demand that they move themselves from those lands. And we saw another one in Brazil, where the Amazon is being developed with these gigantic structures, and the local people are being abolished from their land.
It's happened in Africa
unjust.
too. Land has been taken away from, you know, small tribal groups and sold to foreign multinational corporations that are going to export it, and their subsistence living is
totally destroyed.
Totally destroyed.
Yeah. So we need to really be involved, is what you were saying, to improve our nature and to have the ideology internally, but not to express it externally as to what is going on around us. What is that you always say? Commission and omission? Would that not be omission, is what comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Just
last
kind of
question.
comment or a question. This student's understanding is nature exists for humanity's benefit, and to go around in the circle, can we fairly easily, I think you've said it in many ways, we actually create conditions, these harsh conditions and these benevolent conditions that we face every day. The animals of the field, they're saying that that's kind of a byproduct of what we, quote, need for our development. And we need to take heed, because we are now developing our individuality as opposed to instinct, which is quite a difference. Therefore, we are really, we have a lot more responsibility than other elements of our society.
Yeah, I mean, the water is here for us to use, as you say, but it's not here for us to ruin it, pollute it, and make ourselves sick with it, or our children or grandchildren, by not taking care of it. So there has to be a sense of responsibility within each person, but also shared responsibility. Okay, thank you so much. Next week is, what is next week? Next week is the 22nd, Realizing the Higher Self, and we look forward to you joining us then. Please feel free to leave comments. Check out our website, ultdc.org. And
Facebook too.
And on Facebook too.
So we try to be reachable. Please reach out to us. Thank you.